Yeah,
Am I at the wrong
do the
conference?
farming report.
Oh, okay.
And I'll do the Farmer's Almanac weather report.
Excellent.
It's going to be a harsh winter, Manitobans.
I hate to tell you this, but that's not news.
Could be worse. Could be Saskatchewan.
Oh, Fatty is taking a cable somewhere.
He wants to get a cable.
To get it.
Now, there's been a slight delay while we attempt to hook up video for you guys to, I guess, discuss.
Okay.
But welcome, and you guys can take it away and talk about whatever the heck it is you want to. Your MC should be back soon.
What would you guys like to talk about this morning? Have any pressing concerns? Open therapy session right now.
I asked you this yesterday, you told me to come to the panel, so here I am. How did you get selected as the voice for Captain Canuck?
Well, the guy who could answer that is going to get a cable.
I can actually answer that, because I'm responsible for it.
That's right, it's his fault.
It's my fault.
It's always Mr. Gold's fault.
Actually, Fadi, who was a friend of mine prior to this project, through a friend I did theatre with, we were at a cottage, and he told me that he had the rights to Captain Canuck, and he basically started off with, he owns a bunch of restaurants, one in particular called the Lakeview, and there he is, the man with the cable. And he had a child's menu where he had used Captain Canuck on the child's menu. He was telling me all about it, and that that they were reimagining the whole thing a little bit. And I had no idea who Captain Canuck was. And he asked me if I could suggest anybody who would be good for the voice of Captain Canuck. And foolishly, I recommended Chris Holden-Reid.
Regretted it ever since.
Yeah, and I think Fadi were in touch.
I don't regret it at all.
No, Chris.
It's a perfect edition.
Thanks, man.
And Fadi tried to convince me to do something in it, and maybe do Mr. Gold, and I thought I wasn't right for it.
I actually kind of had to, like, Chris and I had to, we double teamed them. We said,
We sat down.
Not like
at
that.
first he said the voice of Gold has to be older. He's got to be a lot older, right?
Yeah.
And then when Chris and I, I met Chris at the Lakeview, and we talked, and he's like, wow, this is really exciting, this is going to be great. And then we double teamed Paul, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And then, Paul, you could do it, man, you can do it. And he's like, yeah, I can do it, yeah.
And he backed me into submission. And that was that. So that's kind of how it came about. And then we called, and Fadi cast the other two ladies in the project, and two very good ladies actually. And that's how the voices came about.
This is actually probably the most well-cast anime coming out of Canada right now.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And we don't even
All
I can say, we better get a full boat series and movie out of this.
It's not halfway about it, especially with the music too, The music is amazing. It's like Platinum Blonde and The Watchmen.
Exactly.
Rush.
Have you all seen the web series? Yeah. Has anybody not seen it? Okay.
Because
We're going to show it here today, so we can all, watch it. But any other questions? Or are we just going to ramble? So Richard, let's ask Richard, because to be honest with you, Richard's the whole mastermind behind this. And I was actually on Air Canada, flying to LA the other night, and I sat down to en route to the Canadian section, and I saw a documentary called Lost Heroes. And I was amazed. I knew that Captain Canuck was a big thing, but I had no idea how big it was when it came out. Can you talk about what it was like when it actually took off, and what what it was like to be a part of that at the time?
Are we on Winnipeggers here?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not, but I am at work.
Well, I think you know the history that I started Captain Canuck here in 1975. I grew up in Manitoba. I grew up in Portage Prairie. Anybody?
Woo!
Portage Prairie is that cool. Patty and I did workshops there on Thursday, and you know, my brother Tim, who is an OPP officer in Ontario, more than 2 or 3 times and I've actually gone out on calls with, I've gone out on patrol with him, which was a lot of fun. But he often says, you know, when we face a difficult decision, no problem, we're Manitoba boys, we can handle this. We often say that, so we're proud to be from Manitoba. Anyways, with that aside, the history of Captain Canuck, it's all here in Manitoba. I started out as a crest designer right out of high school, and I attended Red River College in 1970. I did all kinds of things. I was a graphic designer. I did some fashion styling after being a crest designer. The garment industry was big in Winnipeg at one time. A lot of clothing was made here.
Why was it big in Manitoba?
Well,
why textiles?
Well, I think, I don't know how it all gravitated. I don't know the history of that, but Montreal, Winnipeg tended to be the centers for garment manufacturing here. So I met Ron Leishman at church in, I think it was in 1972. We would get together, and really I have to credit Ron for me doing it. We'd get together, and he said there should be a Canadian superhero, there should be a Canadian comic book series. We would talk about it. We eventually settled on the name Captain Canuck, and then he went away. So I was kind of left to do it all by myself. And then George Freeman came along. Does anybody know who George Freeman is? He lives right here in town. Terrific illustrator. He's drawn for Marvel, DC, etc. After I finished issue number 1, I was working on number 2. George literally just showed up at my door. And then about maybe 6 months later, Claude Saint-Aubin came from Montreal, literally just packed a backpack, showed up at my door. We just took him in, and we became a threesome producing Captain Canuck.
How old are you at this point?
I was 24, and knew nothing about.
See the pictures too. He looks. It's the same eyebrows too.
Yeah. Thanks. I did that for my kids. So, what and there's a lot of neat things about it coming out of Canada. You know, Winnipeg is like right in the center of the country. In fact, geographically, it's kind of right in the center of North America. And it was, it was well received. When it came out in 1975, and I don't expect anybody to remember that here, but it made national news. You were here then? You remember? All right. Well, our timing was very good, I think, for Captain Canuck. Not that we were planning it that way, but it just worked out that way.
And how long did it last in terms of, like, you know, the fame of it, running with the comics, and how long did that last?
Well, we were here in 75, 76.
And were you fully employed as the you know? Right.
I did everything at the beginning, absolutely everything, and then George and Claude came along, but you know, it was like selling ad space, and of course we were doing all the art
and the printing was happening.
The printing happened right here in Winnipeg, by the way. The first 3 issues were all printed here in Winnipeg. Stovall, I think. Stovall was the name of the printing company that I know it changed names. Somebody came up to me whose father worked at that printing company while I was here, and this is kind of historic, and in my opinion, anyways, coming here to Winnipeg, 39 years after starting it here in Winnipeg. The reason we left Winnipeg was I was running out of money. Well, I basically ran out of money. Small and you know, I was new at this. I had made some mistakes with, you know, the way I handled the distribution and other things. So I was offered an opportunity to run a small newspaper in Cardston, Alberta, and most of you know, it's a small town in southern Alberta. And George and Claude went with me. They're both single guys. We were only there 5 months. It was a great experience for us, but we went up to Calgary 5 months later and went back to work as commercial artists. And George came back to Winnipeg, and then I got some investors, and we started up again out of Calgary. So basically from 75 to 76, and then we started again early 79, 80, and then I moved on. And then I did another magazine for a short while, and then I started doing children's books and other things like that.
How much was the original Captain Canuck edition?
How much?
How much did it cost?
Oh, 35 cents.
35 cents.
I want to point something out.
I bought it for $1 though.
A little bit better. When I brought it up, it was printed here, of course, and it was a better looking comic book because we used some better paper. We used heat set web printing, and I charged 35 cents. All comics were 25 cents in those days, but very shortly thereafter, both Marvel and DC upped their prices to 35 cents. Captain Canuck sold very, very well. It was distributed all across Canada, and it was distributed in border cities in the U.S. as an experiment. Later on, it was distributed all across the United States, first and only Canadian comic book ever to receive nationwide U.S. distribution. And
And what was the response like in the States to...
It was good, very good. Yeah, we were probably getting as much mail from the United States as we were from Canada. And there were pockets of the U.S. that were. I was invited to Philadelphia in 1994, and as a guest, just like here, and we had a guy dressed up as Captain Canuck there. And the way they pronounced Canuck was really interesting.
Yeah. Canuck.
Yeah.
I was in Texas last week, and they're like, "Oh, and this we like this Captain Canuck you're doing."
Actually, I think that's kind of it's Canuck is Quebecois it's basically a slander on the English speaking, and so they call them Canucks, Canuck, Tabernacle, you know that. And that's basically where Canuck comes from. So it's actually a swear.
Hey, I've been doing it all these years, and I didn't know
that.
How many copies have been printed or sold over the years?
Well, let me ask the last question. What was it? I was going to answer that last question. What was it?
About the U.S. response.
Oh, yeah, no, I just want to mention this. I was telling this story. People came up to me and they said Captain Canuck was really big in the state of Kentucky.
Kentucky will never be Kentucky from now on.
Those would be fighting words here. Just call it Canuckies.
It's Colonel Sanders.
All right, Chris, your question. Approximately 2.4 million to date have been printed. And what we did, by the way, back then, it was all mass market distribution. We would get the returns and sell the returns, and we'd get very little for them, to companies that were jobbers. They would bag them. And then they would put them, and they would get bagged sometimes just with Captain Canuck, or sometimes with Marvel and DC Comics. And then they'd go to Woolco, which I know doesn't exist, and Kmart, all over the U.S. as bag sets, like 4 for 99 cents, that kind of, or whatever, deal.
And originally, how many did you print on the first edition?
The first edition was 200,000.
200,000?
Of each of the first 3.
Huh?
Yeah. And in some of those, we bagged some of those ourselves as collectors' sets.
Okay.
With a 3D diamond.
Wow. That's a lot to come off the back, it seems.
That was the days of mass market distribution, and comic book specialty stores was very, very much in its infancy. There might have been half a dozen, maybe 10 in all of North America in 1975.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And did you, because I remember when I was into comic books, there was always like something you could send off for a club and you get a badge. Did you have that sort of stuff?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, yes. For $3.25, you could get a poster, a T-shirt, a crest, all mailed to you in a tube.
I'm in.
Mailing was 25 cents. That's why we charged $3.25. So 25 cents was the mailing cost.
25 cents to
You
mail.
got a t-shirt.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, eBay would have been so easy. That's awesome.
Guys, we have this queued up. You want to watch